Greetings, First Presbyterian Church, Lebanon. It is a joy to be sharing the message with you all this morning. It has been a few months since I had the opportunity to be in worship with all of you. I have missed our conversations and the many ways in which we shared God's grace with one another. Things have changed, but we believe and trust in the promise that all things work together for good for those who wait in the Lord. I am grateful for this opportunity to be preaching and leading in worship with all of you for the next 3 Sundays. The sermon series for these Sundays is called Breaking Through, Learning to Recognize Jesus. We will be focusing on the Gospel according to John, particularly in the last 2 chapters, which include the testimonies of how Jesus appeared to his loved ones following the resurrection. I believe these appearances from Jesus as portrayed by this gospel provide us with narratives that we can all relate to, while also teaching us significant instructions on how to find Jesus when we struggle to see where he is or what he is doing in the world. This Sunday, we begin with the very first encounter. Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene. Well, can you imagine the grief, the uncertainty, the hopelessness, the anger even that Mary Magdalene was carrying to the tomb that very morning? Perhaps you do. Perhaps you find yourself in similar shoes. Unlike Peter and the other disciple whom Jesus loved, Mary Magdalene decided to stay behind at the tomb, and the day was finally breaking in. But there was darkness, and the cave was probably overwhelmed by darkness. The outside was crowded by shadows from trees and clouds, and the quiet and empty atmosphere most likely caused an eerie feeling throughout the whole space. Yet, Mary Magdalene remained there, in that darkness. She chose to stay behind and waited in the darkness. But she was accompanied by her mixed emotions, right? Her provoking thoughts and her mournful tears. But she chose to stay in that darkness, waiting and wanting to be found. This gospel story reminds me of one of the most memorable moments I had with darkness. Funny enough, it was during a warm summer day in mid-July back when I was about 8 years old. My family had decided to gather all together for a summer reunion. It was a bit unexpected since we will always wait until Christmas to finally see each other. I was thrilled nonetheless. I clearly remember that day for many reasons, one of them being the fact that we all had endless energy. All of us, me and all of my cousins. We wanted to keep playing. We had already spent most of the day hiking the local mountain trail, playing soccer in the streets, and chasing each other all over the house. But we wanted more. We wanted to keep playing. Well, at that point, the day was coming to an end. The sky was turning orange, and we couldn't decide what to play next because of the imminent darkness. An idea came, and we all agreed to play hide and seek, right? It makes total sense. Finding each other in the dark will be more fun and more challenging all at the same time. So, after a few rounds, I decided to go and hide in this very secret spot. It was in the backyard's far right corner, located at a really fair distance from the house, behind some tall bushes and old flower beds. I waited patiently for what it seemed eternity. Yet none of my cousins came to get me. At that moment, I began to feel kind of forgotten. Perhaps I am too good at this game, I told myself, just to make me feel better. I remember feeling so much joy and intensity while I was hiding, But as time went by and as I was sitting in that darkness, I began to feel despair and frustration. I was all alone in this dark place, surrounded by things and creatures I couldn't see or things that I didn't know. It was scary. As I waited in the dark, a great dilemma developed in my mind. Should I surrender to my fear and just come out of this hiding place and go into the house? Or should I wait longer with my anger and frustration in this dark spot, hoping to be found by someone else? Well, I am a very stubborn person by nature, so I waited a while longer, and even longer than that. Just me, myself, and I, sitting in the dark. There are certain things that only happen when it is dark outside. For instance, the stars in the sky are always there, but you can only see them at night. The touch of the wind becomes more embracing when there is nothing else to look at. The noises from all the bugs and creatures that live near to you become a new familiar song, while all the noise from the day is gone. There are many things that can only be experienced when we find ourselves in the dark. As Christians, we tend to divide our experiences in dualism. Good things happen when we are in the light, and bad things happen when we are in the darkness. We associate proper and noble things with daylight and scary, questionable things with nighttime. In the Gospel according to John, Jesus says to the crowd, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. We understand darkness as evil. It is the absence of God. We teach our children and friends that darkness is indeed really bad. We link all the terrible things in the world with darkness. We avoid it at all costs. And as a consequence, we develop a fear of the dark. And the thing is, most of us continue to be afraid of it up to this day. But what if darkness has something to teach us? What if instead of fearing the dark, we could embrace it as a place where God can also be present? What if Jesus becomes more visible in the dark? Now, I am not discounting the fact that plenty of bad things do happen in the dark. And many of us have very different experiences with the dark because we all have personal stories and we all see it in a very unique way. However, the kind of darkness that I am referring to is more of a spiritual darkness, a kind of darkness that captures our feelings, our thoughts, our responses. It may seem that as the days go by, especially right now, some of us are being slowly pulled into a spiritual darkness. And that is understandable. We are enduring very difficult times. We are trying our very best. We are making things work. But as we do all these things, we must acknowledge the status of our spiritual health. Are we sitting in the dark, waiting to be found? For the past 8 weeks, we have stayed at home. While we continue to be the faithful church, we have not been able to gather all in one place. We haven't been able to catch up with people we love face to face or even give them a hug. We haven't been able to sing with our pew neighbors our favorite hymns. We haven't been able to visit those who are suffering in hospitals or care facilities. We haven't been able to pay our bills or find all the necessary nourishments. We haven't been able to love those with whom we live as well as we should. And on top of all of that, perhaps we have been struggling to hear God's voice as we seek understanding, as we keep asking what we should do next. Friends, all of those things do affect our spiritual health. All those things, whether we acknowledge it or not, pull us into some form of darkness. Episcopal priest and theologian Barbara Brown Taylor, in her book Learning to Walk in the Dark, writes some powerful words that provide us a new concept for darkness. She expresses, "Meanwhile, here is some good news you can use. Even when the light fades and darkness falls, as it does every single day in every single life, God does not turn the world over to some other deity. Even when you cannot see where you are going and no one can answer when you call, this is not sufficient proof that you are alone. But whether you decide to trust the witness of those who have gone before you, or you decide to do whatever it takes to become a witness yourself, here is the testimony of faith. Darkness is not dark to God. The night is as bright as the day." As I waited to be found behind those bushes and all flower beds, with both my anger and frustration, I began to find some peace in such darkness. I became curious about all the noises around me. What kind of creature is this? I also got to see the stars, including Orion's belt, shining right on top of me. I even started to reflect on my cousins, why they left me. And now, as I look back at that situation, I realized that I had hidden myself in a scary spot that most likely no one wanted to approach. So, inevitably, they chose to leave me behind in the dark. I don't blame them. Perhaps I would have done the same. For darkness is not for everyone. And it was my choice to remain in the dark, waiting and wanting to be found. Suddenly, at that moment, I heard a voice across the yard coming from the house. "Hasiel, where are you? You need to come home right now." I knew that voice. Yes, that voice that had sung songs to me, that voice that had read stories to me before bed, that voice that had cared for me and prayed with me since my earliest memory. Yes, I recognized that voice. It was my mother's voice. To be honest, she sounded a bit annoyed and worried. I didn't mind. For me, it was enough to know that she was looking for me. I felt such comfort knowing that I was not alone. There was someone else with me on that dark night. Just with the sound of my mother's voice, I knew that everything was fine. I was no longer afraid. I had been found. "Mary," Jesus said to her. So she turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni, teacher." Mary Magdalene recognized that voice when she heard Jesus say her name. But before this exchange, Jesus had already spoken to her. He had asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Yet she couldn't recognize him. Her fear, her pain, her doubts, her grief, all of those things stood as a barrier, as a really tall bush. Even though she was the one searching for her teacher, the darkness within her wouldn't let her see where Jesus was. And friends, that is also true for many of us. When we find ourselves in darkness, We feel as it is our responsibility to look for the light. That is the only thing that we are supposed to do. We become so fixated on finding a way out so that we dismiss the possibility of encountering something good while we are in the dark. We fear it so much, that fear ultimately becomes the only thing that we can see and experience. The thing is, we cannot continue like that. We must learn to dwell and walk in the dark. We must find curiosity and reflection. We must hold on to faith and courage. We must stop searching desperately and restlessly for the light. The morning will come. That is a fact and a promise. Therefore, we must learn to wait in the dark. Beloved church, during these times of darkness, who is it you are looking for? I bring this question to you this morning. If you are desperate to find the light, I invite you to simply wait. Wait to be found. What is darkness teaching you? What are some new songs that you haven't heard before while you are waiting in the dark? What are the new glimpses of light that give you a new direction? How is faith and hope helping you hold everything together? But as you wait, pay attention to one particular sound. Can you hear Jesus calling your name? Can you hear it? Can you hear Jesus say, Neil, Michael, Sarah, Lisa, Tom, Mark, Jenny, Chris, Jesse, Margaret, John? Friends, you don't have to keep searching. You just have to recognize that you have already been found. And so when you hear your name as you find yourself restlessly awake in the middle of the darkest night, remember to simply say, Speak, for your servant is listening. Amen.